Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I apologize, my Portuguese is not much beyond obrigado, so I will speak in English and hopefully slowly enough for the translators. It's a real pleasure for Unicef to be here in Brazil and at this very strategic global conference. It's a welcome occasion to assess progress and discuss the remaining challenges that we have. And I think from yesterday through to the session that just finished prior to this one, we know there are enormous challenges ahead of us. I would be remiss in not congratulating the government of Brazil for hosting this meeting and for its leadership in the elimination of child labor. And it's certainly a shining example in terms of teaching us innovative domestic approaches and internationally, and Brazil is an engine for South-South as well as triangular cooperation to address child labor, and also my sincere appreciation to our sister agency, the ILO. This is a very important panel for UNICEF, this issue of education and child labor, and we know it's much more than simply if we build the schools, the children will come. For UNICEF, the promotion of child-friendly, violence-free, high-quality, relevant education for all children is an essential component of our efforts to protect children. I was going to show a little film clip at this juncture, but I've decided not to show the clip. It would have singled out a single country. And in fact, I think we know from listening to the various speakers since yesterday, we have a global problem. This issue of child labor affects every country. Friends, the new global estimates of child labor released by the ILO do show a steady decrease in child labor, and this is positive news. But in UNICEF, we're impatient, and we believe this progress is too slow. At current rates, more than 100 million children will still be trapped in child labor by 2020. The continuing persistence of child labor has, as we all know, many negative consequences for the realization of the rights of children. We should salute the sincere efforts by so many countries represented here, but much more is needed, and that action needs to be urgent. At UNICEF, and you'll see this in the paper that we prepared for the conference, which is still a work in progress, it's on a memory stick, you will have received it. We believe that effective action against child labor requires that we place children at the center of programs designed to protect them. We're looking at child labor through a broader lens, addressing the full range of children's vulnerabilities and protection challenges in a variety of areas. This implies focusing more sharply on poverty reduction, social welfare, justice, labor policies, and what brings us to this panel, education. As integrated and holistic approach not only ensures cost effectiveness, leveraging scarce resources, but it's also more efficient, and it results in sustained gains. So what we're saying in UNICEF and among partners is that understanding the underlying causes and addressing their interconnectedness is the key premise of our approach to preventing and responding to child labor. Providing access to basic services, strengthening national child protection systems, including social protection, and promoting social change are not new interventions, but approaching and supporting them holistically is the new way of doing business in child protection. I invite you to consult the paper that is on that memory stick for more details about this systemic approach. And I hasten to add that it's not an approach exclusive to UNICEF. Our sister agencies, members of civil society, governments around the world are adopting a much more systemic approach to protecting children. While we're strengthening child protection systems across the board, we must simultaneously reinforce the evidence base through better data collection and research, and I think we've heard this theme over the last 2 days. Importantly, this includes research that helps us better understand the phenomenon of violence against children, including places of work, homes, and schools. And that segues me to the topic of this panel. Education is one of the key child protection areas that shows the strongest linkages with child labor. On the one hand, as we know, child labor acts as a major barrier to education, affecting both attendance and performance in school. On the other hand, the education system is an important ally in the child protection system, and access to quality education has enormous potential to reduce child labor. But for education to play its part, the quality of education must be improved, and resources have to be directed to increasing access to schooling for all, including former child laborers, while ensuring that children are learning and the school environment is inclusive. When parents see that children learn, and when these children get jobs, this will be the scenario that convinces families of the value of education. The cycle of poverty can be broken when poor parents see that it can be broken. In this respect, I'd like to convey a number of important key messages. First, the issue of quality in education. A good quality education provides a range of well-known benefits, from increasing earnings in the future to reducing infant mortality, to say nothing of helping to combat HIV and AIDS and improving our stewardship of the environment. However, these benefits are only realized if children are learning while they are in school. Of the roughly 650 million children of primary school age in the world today, up to 250 million are not learning the basics, even though half of them have spent 4 years in school. Improving learning is therefore a top priority, both to realize children's rights to education and the potential of education to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. And when parents see that children are learning, they remain convinced that their children should be in school and not laboring in some field or down a gold mine somewhere. Second point, getting working children into school will require more flexible and responsive education systems with improved learning environments. Primary education must be genuinely free and accessible to all, including those who were working before. Schools have to be safe, inclusive. They need to provide child-friendly, high-quality education, including vocational education. An example of this approach, our offices in Argentina, we launched a project called Ciudad por la Educación, Cities for Education. This initiative aims to get more children and adolescents to stay in school, receive quality education, and complete their studies. Following up on child protection concerns, including child labor, is part of this very successful effort. I want to dwell for a moment on making schools safe. This includes determined action to eliminate violence in schools. Children are more likely to drop out early if subjected to violence, including playground fighting, verbal abuse, intimidation, humiliation, corporal punishment, sexual abuse, gang violence, or other forms of cruel and humiliating treatment by their peers, by school personnel. In this respect, I'd like to refer you to a very thoughtful report published by the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children in 2012, which proposes a number of concrete actions to address violence in schools. Third point, reducing the number of children out of school is an urgent priority. Even today, as I mentioned, there are almost 600 million children of primary school age in school. There are 57 million children out of school. Some of the 600 million are still working and going to school and working in violent and exploitative places, and they're at risk of dropping out. Almost half of the children out of school will never enroll, and the other half will drop out early. There is a high probability these children are exposed to violence and exploitation in workplaces. For this reason, together with our partner agency UNESCO in 2010, we launched the Global Out-of-School Children Initiative. It's designed to accelerate efforts towards universal primary education and achieve a breakthrough in reducing the number of out-of-school children while addressing disparities in both access and attendance. The program aims to build evidence on the phenomenon of educational exclusion and identify strategies that will, quite simply, get children into schools so that they can learn. A number of successful child labor and education programs involve community-wide school enrollment drives, including reaching out to children who have previously dropped out. For example, a project on vocational rural development of the Vocational Rural Development Center in India, enrollment campaigns were led by children themselves. They collaborated with the district education office, schools, and women's community groups. In Bangladesh, UNICEF is engaged in flexible schooling approaches, providing ability-based learning in disadvantaged rural areas to accommodate the varied schedules and learning levels of out-of-school children. By following an accelerated national curriculum, children are able to catch up and transfer into formal schools, creating a pull away from labor and building a stronger foundation for academic success. And the key to these approaches really is flexibility. Fourth point, we need to find better ways to systematically include child labor concerns in national education plans. For example, UNESCO conducted a survey in 2009 of 44 national education plans. Only 8 identified child laborers as marginalized groups. Of these 8, only 4 mentioned strategies to reach out to those children. More thought is needed to consider how education strategies can ensure the enrollment and retention of excluded and vulnerable groups of children. An interesting example is Morocco, where specific provisions related to child labor have been incorporated into both national labor legislation and education legislation and sector plans. Non-formal or transitional education programs can be very effective in helping former working children. These programs, and we've seen them all over the world, of education for children who, for a variety of reasons, are either not in school or unable to go to school. They develop literacy and numeracy. They provide other forms of remedial support and assist children in catching up to their peers in state schools to facilitate their entry into the formal system. And I want to underscore this point for a moment. This is not a substandard parallel system of learning for laboring children, but one which brings children into the formal system at the right age for grade. And we certainly know from listening to children themselves, and I did this during my period of work in both Bangladesh and India, 12-year-old children do not like sitting next to 6-year-olds in a classroom. They want to be sitting next to 12-year-olds, so we have to find innovative ways of getting them back to the level of their peers. Other measures are being envisaged in the area of social transfers, such as conditional cash transfer administered by schools or government. For example, again to use a Bangladesh example, since 1994, there has been a program to provide stipends as an incentive to families to enroll girls in secondary school. It's been highly effective. In Liberia, we're supporting social cash transfer programs to discourage child labor and encourage education. Beneficiary households receive monthly cash transfers that vary according to the size of the households. Now, I want to dwell for a moment on this next point, which is that education alone is not enough. Getting children out of work and into school requires broader changes in public policy to empower families to choose education over exploitative labor. And I think we heard from the president of this country in her opening address how important making the right policy choices is for a country. Social and economic disparities need to be addressed through social protection, livelihoods assistance, and access to social services. This is the holistic approach I was referring to at the outset. Awareness raising and advocacy is key to challenge discriminatory beliefs based on gender, social status, disability, or ethnic or national origin. So we're talking about truly inclusive education for all. Schools, teachers, and students alike can be part of an outreach and advocacy program to make parents and community members aware of the dangers of child labor and the opportunities of education. This includes simplifying legislative provisions so that they are understood by parents and providing information on sources of support. Other important elements are capacity building of education personnel as well as employers on labor provisions. My next point is about teachers, parents, and children as a first line of defense. School and community-based monitoring systems, as we find in such places as Mozambique, Angola, and Guinea, involve parents, teachers, and peers. They are particularly effective as early warning systems to identify children who are regularly absent. In such cases, home visits can be organized to talk to the child concerned and his or her parents to find out the reason for their absences and persuade the child or the parents to have the child return. The monitoring system can ensure that community support systems are activated to help the child and the family, or when necessary, refer the situation to the appropriate authorities. One final and very important point in this respect, and I want to dwell on it, is that we have to invest in teachers, securing their fair pay and dignifying their work conditions, and offering them genuine career opportunities. And I really wanted to say I think we need to afford teachers the same respect we afford the medical profession. Let's give them the respect that they're due. Let me conclude with just 3 final points. We need to link all of our efforts to protect children from all forms of violence, exploitation, abuse, and neglect. Strengthening child protection systems will be a big step towards that, with education, social welfare, labor, and justice working even more closely than they are already. Second, let data drive us forward in our anticipation that we can end child labor and that all children can learn in safe school environments. The baselines and benchmarks will keep us all on track. If governments, such as our here in Brazil, can find a way to articulate the protection of children in the post-2015 agenda and goals, we'll be even further down the track in realizing the rights of our young population. The post-2015 agenda is the agenda of governments around the world, to be supported by the UN system and by civil society, but we need you to articulate. We have a saying in child protection that if you're not at the, if you're not, how do we put it? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And this idea of really specifically articulating loudly our strong desire as a global community to protect children will be so important in post-2015. My final comment here is that ending child labor is about ending violence against children. We need to call child labor. And just to be clear, I'm not referring to safe, light work that children can do and learn from. I'm calling child labor what it is. When we name it, we as a human society have to face it head on. And to use a phrase from our renewed focus at Unicef on ending violence, we need to make visible the invisible. Thank you very much.